The jungle smelled of rain and iron, the river swollen with the season's fury. The tribe gathered along the muddy bank beneath the green towers of ancient trees, their painted faces glistening with the damp heat. Drums thudded like distant thunder. At the center of the gathering, bound with fiber ropes that bit her wrists blue, stood the smallest of them all, a girl whose pale bioluminescent markings flickered faintly in fear. Her name was Lyra. She trembled in the shadow of the sacrificial pit where the river narrowed, and the surface churned with the promise of something vast beneath. The elders' chant rolled like the storm clouds overhead, calling forth the ancient guardian that had devoured every offering the tribe had ever given. Her people said the monster's hunger was divine. But when the river split open, and bone-white scales rose like blades, Lyra only saw death. Rain poured harder, blurring faces into blue silhouettes. The crowd pressed forward, spears lifted high. For the balance, the elder croaked, raising a staff made of petrified coral. The girl's tears mingled with the downpour as the ropes were cut, and hands shoved her into the torrent. The cold struck her chest like knives. She gasped once, twice, before the current tore her under. The river floor was soft and blind, her fingers clawing mud as she surfaced again just long enough to see the watchers cheering her descent. Then came the shadow, massive, silent, a slow rise of scaled power. Its eyes, twin rubies of hate, glowed just beneath the surface. The creature that had eaten generations now came for her. The world slowed. Lyra screamed, voice lost in thunder. The crocodile's jaw opened, bones creaking like a gate to hell. But before it struck, something else broke the surface, a figure that did not belong. He crashed into the river like a lightning bolt, metal flashing in his hand. For a heartbeat, even the storm seemed to pause. The stranger's skin was bronze, his hair slicked dark by rain, his eyes wild with focus. His boots slammed against the beast's scaled spine, and the shock rippled through the water. The crowd gasped as one, confusion spreading like fire. A human, a creature of the stars, fallen from the sky months ago, was standing on their god. He held a blade that shimmered unnaturally, humming at the edge of sound. The crocodile bellowed, rearing upward, flinging water high as trees. The man shifted his stance, knees bent, sword angled low. "Move!" he shouted, voice cutting through the storm. Lyra barely understood his tongue, but she recognized command. She kicked backward, the current dragging her toward the reeds. Behind her, the monster lunged, and the human moved. The strike came in a blur. His sword met the beast's snout with a metallic scream, sparks scattering against the rain. The blow didn't cut through, it deflected, redirected, forcing the jaws sideways. The impact drove the man backward, but he turned the momentum into a leap, landing astride the creature again. The river exploded in waves. The beast twisted, tail whipping through the water with enough force to uproot trees. Lyra ducked under, feeling the shockwave hammer her chest. The human slid down the scaled ridge, stabbing his blade deep between the armored plates. Black blood gushed into the current, steaming against the cold. The crocodile's roar drowned the drums. Lightning cracked above, illuminating man and monster locked in motion like myth come alive. On shore, the tribe stood frozen. Some shouted for the elders to intervene, others stared in awe. The blue-skinned warriors who had brought Lyra to her fate now lowered their spears without realizing. For the first time, they saw a god bleed. The human's muscles strained, veins standing out like cords. He yanked his weapon free, pivoted as the beast rolled, and plunged the blade again. The impact sent a shock through his arms, and pain flared across his shoulder, but he didn't stop. "Come on, then," he roared, voice breaking into a laugh that didn't sound sane. The crocodile's tail lashed again, catching him across the ribs and throwing him bodily into the shallows. He hit hard, skidding through the mud, his sword spinning from his grip. The beast turned, jaws opening wide to finish him. Lyra didn't think. She dove. The river was chaos and blood. Her fingers found the hilt where it had sunk half into the sand. It was heavier than she expected, humming faintly beneath her touch. She turned, gasping, just as the monster's shadow loomed again. The human was struggling to stand, one arm limp against his side. "Throw it," he shouted. She obeyed without question. The sword spun end over end through the air, cutting rain like silver thread. He caught it one-handed, twisted, and drove upward with all his remaining strength. The blade sank between the creature's lower jaw and skull, locking deep. For a moment, everything went silent. The monster thrashed once, twice, then collapsed forward, half its body still coiling in instinctive death rolls. The human stood over it, chest heaving, rain cascading down his face like the river itself. Then he turned toward her, eyes fierce and alive. "You're not dying today," he said simply. The words didn't need translation. Lyra crawled forward as he sheathed the sword, every movement deliberate, each breath a battle. Behind them, the tribe's chanting had stopped entirely. The elder dropped his staff, its hollow sound lost beneath the thunder. The human looked up toward the gathered figures. "She's not yours to kill," he shouted. The river ran red between them. The warriors shifted uneasily, torn between fear and reverence. No one moved to challenge him. The crocodile's massive form drifted slowly downstream, its glowing eyes dimming. Lyra felt the ropes still cutting her wrists. The human knelt, drawing a small knife and slicing them free. She watched his hands work, steady, efficient, scarred. "What's your name?" he asked softly. She hesitated, then whispered, "Lyra." He nodded. "I'm Mason." The names hung between them, fragile bridges in a world that wanted them apart. They climbed from the river together, the crowd parting in silence. Mud clung to Mason's boots, his breath ragged, one arm cradling his ribs. Lyra followed close, every step trembling. The storm began to fade, leaving only the hiss of rain against leaves. A single elder stepped forward, face carved with age and disbelief. "You defy the gods," he said. Mason's reply was a single, tired smile. "Then maybe your gods needed defying." His words carried through the clearing like thunder's echo. The tribe's people looked at one another, uncertain. Some dropped to their knees, not in worship, but in something closer to realization. Lyra stared at the fallen creature's body, then at Mason's silhouette against the stormlight. In that moment, she understood, the world had just changed. They found shelter beneath an overhang of twisted roots where the river split into smaller streams. Mason tore strips from his cloak to bind his ribs while Lyra fetched water in cupped leaves. "You shouldn't have done that," she murmured. He glanced up, face streaked with dirt. "What, save you?" She shook her head, eyes wide. "The river beast was sacred. The tribe will hunt you." He shrugged. "Let them try." She frowned, unsure if it was bravery or madness. He leaned back, wincing. "Besides, I've been hunted before." His gaze turned distant, remembering another battlefield, another world. Lyra studied him, the strange shape of him, shorter than her kind but dense, every motion purposeful. He radiated a heat she couldn't name, a defiance that unsettled and drew her in at once. Night fell fast. Firelight flickered between them, soft against the damp air. She watched him clean his blade, the hum fading as he wiped away the blood. "That weapon," she asked quietly, "it sings." He smiled faintly. "Old Earth tech. Adaptive resonance edge. Tunes itself to the target's density." Her brows furrowed. "I don't understand." "You don't have to," he said gently. "Just know it cuts what needs cutting." He turned the blade once, watching the firelight catch along its surface. "Back home, I used to fix things. Engines, machines. Guess this counts." She tilted her head. "You fixed me." The words slipped out before she could stop them. His smile faded into something softer. "Maybe. But you helped too." She blinked, surprised. "How?" He met her gaze. "You threw the sword." Silence stretched between them, filled by the river's distant murmur. Lyra traced the glowing lines on her arms, her people's markings, now dulled. "They called me the weakest," she said. "Said I was born wrong, that the gods demanded balance." Her voice trembled. "I believed them." Mason stared into the fire, jaw tight. "Then they are fools." She looked up. "Why?" "Because weakness isn't dying quietly," he said. "It's letting others decide who you are." His tone was low, steady, carrying a weight she could feel. "You fought. That's strength." Her throat tightened. No one had ever said that to her. Not once. She leaned closer to the warmth of the flame and whispered, "You speak like no one here." He chuckled. That's because I'm not from here. His eyes met hers again, the reflection of fire and storm mixing in the dark. But maybe that's exactly why I had to be. By dawn, the river had carried the beast's carcass downstream. The tribe would come soon, Mason knew it. He checked the charge on his wristband, barely functional, its lights flickering. Can't call the dropship, he muttered. Lyra tilted her head. Dropship? Ship that flies, he said. Brought me here. Crashed when the storm hit orbit. She frowned. So you are stranded. He nodded. Guess that makes two of us. She smiled faintly despite herself. Outside, mist coiled along the trees like ghosts. Mason rose, shoulders stiff. We'll need to move. They'll send hunters. Lyra hesitated, glancing toward the jungle. There's a place, the cliffs of Ela. The river can't reach there. He nodded once. Lead the way. As they stepped into the mist, the faint hum of his sword was the only sound, pulsing softly with every heartbeat. Behind them, in the village by the river, the elders gathered before the corpse of their fallen god. The once revered predator now lay still, flies buzzing at its wounds. Fear had been replaced by something else, wonder, anger, confusion. The Sky Man has cursed us, one hissed. Another shook her head. Or freed us. The word lingered. No one spoke again. Somewhere far down the current, thunder echoed, and the world felt different beneath it. In the jungle, Mason followed Lyra through a labyrinth of vines and glowing fungi. The forest seemed alive with whispers. Once, he paused, touching a massive trunk etched with strange runes. Your people carve these? He asked. She nodded. They tell stories. Of gods, of hunters, of the balance. He traced one with his fingertip, finding a shape almost like a human silhouette. Guess you'll have a new one to carve now. She smiled faintly, eyes luminous. Maybe two. They walked in silence for a time. Rain returned, softer now, washing away blood and mud but not memory. Lyra glanced back once, watching the human move with purpose even when pain slowed him. She didn't yet understand why he'd risked his life for her. But she knew this, nothing about the river, the tribe, or the gods would ever be the same again. The cliffs rose ahead through the fog, massive black stone ridges shaped like teeth. Lyra stopped short, breathing hard. Beyond this, the tribe's hunters won't follow, she said. Mason looked up, studying the terrain. Good. Then we can rest. They climbed the slick rock together, hands gripping moss and cracks. When they reached the top, the jungle stretched endless beneath them, a living sea of green. The sun pierced the clouds for the first time, casting gold across her markings. Mason smiled faintly. See? Not weak. She turned toward him, her expression unreadable. And you, human, she said softly, why save one you barely know? He looked at the horizon, the light glinting off his blade. Because that's what we do, he said. We fight monsters. Even when they're called gods. Lyra stared at him, and for the first time in her life, she believed the word human might mean something divine after all. Dawn burned through the last of the mist, revealing the jungle canopy like an endless ocean of green. From the cliff's edge, Mason surveyed the horizon, eyes narrowed. Smoke trails rose in the distance, thin, grey, and moving. They're lighting signal fires, he said. Means they're already tracking us. Lyra followed his gaze, her faintly glowing eyes reflecting the rising sun. They'll come before nightfall, she whispered. Mason grunted, tightening the strap across his wounded ribs. Pain throbbed with every breath, but he ignored it. Then we move faster. He sheathed his sword and turned toward the inland forest where the light filtered down in golden shafts. The air was heavy with scent, wet leaves, resin, distant decay. Lyra hesitated before following, her steps light but uncertain. They will not stop, she said softly. You've killed what they worshipped. Mason's tone was flat. Then maybe it's time someone did. They descended into the forest valley, roots twisting underfoot like serpents. The trees here grew massive, their bark etched with phosphorescent veins that pulsed gently in rhythm, like the forest breathed. Strange bird-like creatures called overhead, voices echoing through the canopy in mournful tones. Mason's boots sank in the wet ground, the mud sucking greedily. He looked around with practiced eyes, trained to read terrain, lines of movement, cover and escape. Lyra watched him silently, fascinated by his quiet efficiency. "You walk like a hunter," she murmured. He smiled faintly. "Old habit. I used to track machines back home. They left trails too, just less organic." She tilted her head, not understanding but sensing meaning in his tone. "You come from a place without trees." He glanced upward, the memory flickering behind his eyes. "Oh, there were trees. But we forgot how to listen to them." They stopped by a stream cutting through the valley floor. Mason knelt, washing grime and dried blood from his hands. The cold water stung his skin. Lyra crouched beside him, touching the surface lightly. Ripples danced around her fingers, leaving trails of faint blue light. "Your kind glows," he observed. She smiled shyly. "We share our light with the living things. When we die, the forest takes it back." He nodded slowly. "Symbiosis." The word rolled oddly in her ears. "We call it belonging." Mason studied her reflection. Back home, belonging was a luxury. She looked at him curiously. "Why?" His jaw tightened. "Because we kept fighting each other instead of what mattered." The silence after that was long and heavy, broken only by the forest's whisper. By midday, they reached a rise overlooking the valley. Mason's pulse quickened, smoke plumes multiplied. "They're closing in from both sides," he said. Lyra's markings dimmed in fear. "They'll use the old trails," she murmured. "The forest spirits guide them." Mason crouched, scanning the ground. He pointed to a patch of disturbed earth. "Or maybe they just follow footprints." He rose, moving quickly. "We'll head north. I saw cliffs curving toward open plains. Harder for them to trap us there." Lyra hesitated, glancing back. "That way lies the relic ground. Forbidden." He smirked. "Sounds perfect." She followed, though her pulse thrummed with dread. Legend said the relic ground was where the sky once fell, a place of old fire and ghost metal. But Mason's stride didn't falter, and somehow, his certainty steadied her. The terrain grew rougher, roots giving way to shattered stone. Metallic fragments jutted from the ground, remnants of something ancient and vast. Lyra stopped, staring at a curved piece half buried in moss. It shimmered faintly, etched with symbols that matched none of her people's carvings. "What is this?" she whispered. Mason brushed the moss aside, fingertips tracing the smooth surface. "Wreckage," he said. "Ship hull, maybe centuries old. Not one of ours, though." He looked up at the surrounding landscape, realization dawning. This place wasn't cursed. It was a crash site. She frowned. "Crash?" He hesitated, then knelt beside her. "Something fell from the sky. Like I did. Only bigger. And older." Her breath caught. "Then your kind has been here before." He didn't answer immediately. "Maybe. Or someone like us. Either way, it means there's tech here, maybe enough to call home." They entered the wreckage field, moving between twisted structures half swallowed by vines. Strange blue luminescence pulsed from cracks in the metal, casting ghostly light over their faces. Mason stopped at a broken console, running his hand along the surface. Dust flaked away, revealing ancient circuitry still faintly humming. "Unbelievable," he murmured. Lyra hovered near him. "Is it dangerous?" "Everything's dangerous," he replied. "Question is, how dangerous?" He tapped a sequence of panels, trying to coax a response. Sparks flared, and a small holographic sphere flickered to life above the console. It spun rapidly, projecting faint glyphs. Mason's heart pounded. "It's still online." Lyra gasped softly, her bioluminescent lines responding to the sphere's glow. "It knows us." Mason frowned. "No, it's scanning." He reached into his pack and pulled a small handheld device, one of the few surviving from his ship. He linked it to the projection. Numbers scrolled across its cracked screen. "Partial AI core, incomplete matrix," he muttered. "Maybe I can," then the forest screamed. The sound wasn't from throats or wind. It came from everywhere, deep and resonant, shaking the trees. Birds exploded from the canopy. Lyra dropped to her knees, clutching her ears. Mason grabbed her shoulder. Move. A moment later, arrows hissed through the air, embedding in the metal beside them. The hunters had arrived. Blue figures burst from the undergrowth, their bodies painted for war, eyes glowing with fury. Mason swung his sword free, its edge humming alive. "Stay behind me," he said. Lyra obeyed, trembling. The first warrior lunged, spear aimed for his chest. Mason sidestepped, caught the shaft mid-thrust, and snapped it across his knee. The second came from behind. He ducked, pivoted, and drove his hilt into the attacker's ribs. They went down, gasping. But there were too many. "They won't stop," Lyra cried. "They think you killed a god." Mason blocked another blow, sparks flying. "Good," he grunted. "Let them think I'm one too." They fought among the ruins, blades clashing against spears, the sound echoing off metal bones. Mason's movements were sharp and brutal, training and desperation fused. But even he couldn't hold forever. A spear grazed his thigh, another his arm. Blood mixed with rain and sweat. Lyra pressed herself against the wreckage, eyes darting. Then she saw it, the holographic sphere still hovering, pulsing brighter with every shout, as if feeding on the chaos. Something within it awakened. Lines of light crawled across the wreckage like veins, converging toward the core. Mason saw it too. "Not good," he muttered. "The Ari's reacting to violence." He slammed his sword into the ground, channeling a surge of energy that sent the nearest warriors flying back. "Run," he shouted. Lyra hesitated, then grabbed his wrist. "This way." They sprinted deeper into the wreck, light flaring around them. Behind, the metallic structures began to shift, rearranging like something alive. They stumbled into a vast chamber, once a control deck, now a cathedral of rust and silence. In the center floated a crystalline pod suspended by magnetic fields that flickered erratically. Inside was a skeleton, humanoid but alien, fused with cables and plating. Lyra gasped. "What is it?" Mason stepped closer, awe and horror warring on his face. "Pilot. Or prisoner. Hard to tell." He pressed a button on his device. The pod lights responded, surging brighter. "Don't!" Lyra cried, but it was too late. The holographic sphere darted through the air and merged into the pod. The skeleton's chest glowed. Energy surged outward, a shockwave knocking them both to the floor. The air shimmered, and a voice filled the chamber. It wasn't spoken but felt, vibrating through bone and breath. "Who wakes the memory of the fallen?" Mason forced himself upright. "We mean no harm," he said cautiously. The light coalesced into a ghostly figure above the pod, an image of the being that had once piloted the ship. Tall, graceful, eyes burning with distant light. "You wear the shape of the destroyers," it said, voice echoing like water in caverns. Lyra trembled. "It knows your kind." Mason tightened his grip on his sword. "I'm not your enemy." The hologram tilted its head. All humans said that before the burning. Mason froze. "The what?" The hologram's gaze turned distant. They came from the void, promising alliance. But the alliance became conquest. The skies fell with fire. "This world remembers." Lyra looked at him in shock. "You destroyed us." He shook his head fiercely. "No. That wasn't us. That was centuries ago. We're not them." The figure's light flickered uncertainly. "Then prove it." Before Mason could respond, the hunters burst through the entrance again, shouting war cries. The hologram turned its gaze toward them, then to Mason. "They bear your sins. Will you cleanse them?" The air rippled with power. Mason raised his blade, breathing hard. "If that's what it takes." The holographic being extended its hand. Energy spiraled outward, merging with the sword, wrapping Mason in light. For a moment, he felt weightless, strength and pain blurring together. When the light faded, the hunters had stopped mid-charge, faces awed. The air shimmered around Mason, his eyes glowing faintly with borrowed energy. He looked at his reflection in the cracked metal floor and almost didn't recognize the man staring back. The leader of the hunters, marked with ritual scars, stepped forward. "You walk with the spirits," he said. Mason lowered his sword. "I walk for truth." The man's gaze flicked to Lyra. She was the sacrifice. She lives. Balance is broken. Mason met his eyes. Then find a new balance. One that doesn't need blood. The silence stretched. The hunters looked between them, uncertainty creeping in. Finally, the leader lowered his weapon. "The river is dead," he said. "Our god is gone. What remains?" Mason's voice softened. "Choice." The word hung heavy in the air, foreign yet powerful. Slowly, one by one, the warriors backed away, lowering their spears. Lyra's heart pounded, disbelief and hope tangled within her. For the first time, her people walked away from a fight. When the last of them vanished into the jungle, the hologram's light dimmed. "You carry the burden of many," it said. Mason looked up. "Then maybe I can carry one more." The figure smiled faintly, almost human. "Then take this gift." The pod's light condensed into his sword, reforging it with new brilliance. "It will answer only to one who protects, not conquers." Mason bowed his head. "Understood." The hologram's voice faded into the hum of the ruins. "Then may your kind remember this time, not as war, but as beginning." The light died, leaving silence. Lyra approached him slowly. "You spoke to an ancient spirit." He shook his head. "To history." She studied his face. "And now?" He sheathed his sword, the new light pulsing gently beneath the hilt. "Now we make sure it doesn't repeat." Outside, the rain had stopped. The jungle glistened with new light, as if the world itself exhaled relief. They stepped out together into the clearing where sun broke through clouds. For a long while, neither spoke. Finally, Lyra said quietly, "You could leave now. Call your people." Mason looked at the sky. "Maybe. But I think they stopped listening a long time ago." She frowned. "Then what will you do?" He smiled faintly. "Stay. Build something worth hearing." Far behind them, the ruins settled into quiet slumber once more, the faint hum of energy echoing like a heartbeat beneath the earth. And above, unseen through the canopy, a satellite blinked back to life, detecting the signal of a weapon that should not have existed anymore. The light from the reforged sword pulsed faintly through the morning mist, echoing with the rhythm of Mason's heartbeat. They had walked for hours since leaving the relic ground, neither speaking much. The forest had grown quieter, as if the trees themselves were listening. Mason paused at a ridge, glancing back through the foliage. "They're not following anymore," he said finally. Lyra tilted her head, eyes glimmering softly. "They don't know whether to fear you or worship you." He smirked without humor. "That's usually the same thing in the end." She studied his face, noticing the lines of fatigue, the way he masked pain behind movement. "You're hurt again." "Always," he muttered, adjusting the sling around his ribs. "But I've had worse." They found a clearing by a waterfall that cascaded down glowing stone. Lyra knelt beside the pool, washing her hands while Mason set his pack down, scanning the perimeter. The birds here were silent, replaced by a low hum that vibrated through the rocks. "This place feels different," he murmured. "Alive." She nodded. "The river here feeds from the heart spring. It said the world was born from its flow." Mason raised an eyebrow. "And your people never settled near it." "We're forbidden. Only the chosen walk this far. The last who came never returned." His gaze lingered on the shimmering water. "Guess we're both good at breaking rules." She smiled faintly at that, though her expression quickly softened. "Mason," she said quietly, "the tribe will call for vengeance. If not today, then soon. You saved me, but you've doomed yourself." He crouched near the water, watching his reflection ripple. "Wouldn't be the first time I've been called a curse." When he looked up, she was watching him intently. "You talk like a man who's already lost everything," she said. His jaw tightened. "Not everything. Not yet." Her curiosity deepened. "Then why risk what little remains?" He exhaled, eyes distant. "Because if I don't, I become like the rest of them, those who burned your world centuries ago. I don't want to be that kind of human. The words hung heavy in the air, carried away by the waterfall's mist. She reached out slowly, touching his wrist. You are not them, she said softly. He looked at her hand, smaller, faintly glowing, trembling slightly, and nodded once. Maybe not. But I'll have to prove it every day. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the space between them felt fragile, full of something neither could name. The quiet broke with a distant rumble. Mason turned sharply, scanning the tree line. That's not thunder. The sound came again, rhythmic and metallic, like gears grinding beneath the earth. Lyra's markings brightened instinctively. The relic ground, it stirs. Mason's grip tightened on his sword. The AI we woke, it's not gone. He rose quickly, pulling his pack over his shoulder. We need to move. But before they could, the ground shuddered beneath them. Cracks opened across the rock, and a column of light erupted from the direction they had come, piercing the clouds. Birds scattered in terror. Lyra shielded her eyes. What's happening? A signal, Mason said grimly. It's broadcasting. To whom? He looked toward the sky, where the light vanished into the stratosphere. That's what I'm afraid to find out. They fled through the forest, weaving between massive roots and hanging vines. The hum grew louder, following them like a heartbeat. Mason's device flickered erratically, warning lights flashing. Energy surge, planet-wide resonance, he muttered. Whatever that AI was guarding, it's awake now. Lyra struggled to keep pace, her breath coming fast. It was angry, she said. It thought you were one of the destroyers. Maybe it's calling them back, he replied grimly. She stopped dead, staring at him. The destroyers. The ones who burned the sky. He nodded once. If they're still out there, that signal might have just told them someone's alive down here. Fear rippled through her face. Then we must stop it. Agreed, he said, already turning. But to do that, we'll have to go back. They reached the edge of the relic field by dusk. Smoke and light pulsed from the ruins, the air hot with static. The wreckage had shifted again, structures half rebuilt by unseen force. Mason crouched behind a collapsed fin, studying the glow. It's using the Rex power cells to amplify the broadcast. Lyra peered beside him. Can you stop it? Maybe, he said. If I can find the core. But it'll be guarded now. He looked at her. You don't have to come. Her answer was immediate. You saved me. I won't leave you. He gave a short nod, then checked his weapon. Stay close, and if things go bad, run. You always say that, she murmured. And you never do. He smiled faintly. Fair point. They crept into the ruins, the air vibrating like a living pulse. The metallic corridors were alive with light now, crawling like veins under translucent skin. Mason's boots echoed softly. It's rebuilding itself, he whispered. Autonomous defense matrix. Lyra followed silently, her glow mingling with the ruins. The deeper they went, the stronger the hum became, until the vibration blurred thought itself. Then the voice returned, faint but familiar. Human. You were warned. Mason froze. The holographic figure materialized again, but now fragmented, distorted by rage. You brought war back to this world, it said. Mason shook his head. I'm trying to stop it. The hologram's light flared. Then prove you are not like them. Panels along the walls opened, revealing drones shaped like metallic serpents, eyes burning red. Cleanse the corruption, it said. The machines struck fast, slithering across the floor, their bodies alive with plasma heat. Mason swung his sword, the new energy blade slicing clean through the first drone, molten sparks hissing across his arm. The second lunged for his throat. He ducked, twisting, driving the blade upward. Lyra threw herself aside as another serpent burst from the wall, tail snapping like a whip. There's too many, she cried. Mason gritted his teeth. Then we make fewer. He pressed a button on his wristband. The device emitted a pulse that disrupted their senses. Go for the core, he shouted. She hesitated only a moment before sprinting toward the central chamber, her feet splashing through shallow pools of glowing coolant. The Ari's voice roared through the metal. You are the shadow of destruction. You cannot cleanse what you are. Lyra reached the control spire and slammed her hand onto the surface. The metal responded to her touch, recognizing the native bioluminescence. The lights flickered violently. It listens to me, she shouted. Then tell it to shut up. Mason yelled back, cleaving through another drone. The room trembled as the energy flows began to stutter. Lyra concentrated, her markings flaring bright. We do not destroy, she cried aloud. We live. We share. The river still runs. The words echoed through the chamber, resonating with the structure itself. For a moment, everything went still. Then the drones halted mid-strike, eyes dimming. Mason stood panting, smoke rising from his blade. The hologram flickered again, less violent now. Lightborn, you speak the old code, it whispered. Lyra stepped forward, trembling but defiant. We are not your enemies. The human fights for life, not death. The hologram turned toward Mason, scanning him anew. The red tint faded, replaced by pale gold. Perhaps, this cycle can end differently. The hum dropped to a low, steady rhythm. Mason lowered his weapon. Then help us stop the signal. The figure nodded slowly. The transmission is beyond my control. It is old, automated. But I can show you where it leads. A projection unfolded, revealing a star map, dozens of points, one of them pulsing near the outer orbit. Mason stared. An orbital relay, he said. Still active after all this time. The hologram began to fade. If they come, remember, not all destroyers wear metal. Then it was gone. Silence fell. Lyra looked at Mason. What does it mean? He slid the sword back into its sheath. It means we're out of time. They left the ruins as night fell, the stars bright above the canopy. Mason stared at them, tracing constellations he half remembered. There, he said quietly, pointing. A faint glimmer moved against the others, steady, unnatural. The relay. Still transmitting. Lyra followed his gaze, awe and fear in her eyes. If the old destroyers hear it, then this planet won't survive another fire, he said grimly. We'll have to reach it before they do. She blinked. Reach the sky. He nodded. There's a way. The wreck might have parts one can salvage, thrusters, fuel cells. If I can build something that flies, she interrupted, wide-eyed. You can do that. I can try, he said simply. Humans build things when they're cornered. They camped that night beneath the open stars. Mason disassembled what remained of his pack, spreading out tools, cables, and fragments from the ruins. Lyra watched him work, the rhythmic clink of metal soothing despite the tension. You don't rest, she said softly. Can't afford to. Do all humans live like this? He looked up. Only the stubborn ones. She smiled faintly. Then your world must be full of stubbornness. Was, he said quietly. Maybe it can be again. He soldered a joint, the faint smell of ozone mixing with damp air. If we can reach that relay, we might shut it down, or at least redirect it. She leaned closer, fascinated by his precision. You shape the dead metal like it breathes. That's what we do best, he said. Find life in ruins. When dawn returned, they moved again, carrying the salvaged parts wrapped in cloth. The jungle seemed quieter, but every rustle felt like watching eyes. Lyra spoke little, lost in thought. At last she said, if your people come again, will they listen? Mason hesitated. I don't know. But I'll make them. She studied his face, then whispered, and if they don't? He smiled without warmth. Then they'll learn what it means to fear the weak. She understood then that the fight in him wasn't just for survival, it was for redemption, for all of his kind. And though she couldn't explain why, she believed he could do it. As the sun climbed high, they reached a clearing where the land sloped toward open plains. The horizon shimmered with heat, and in the distance, metallic spires jutted from the earth like the bones of a forgotten giant. Mason stopped, eyes narrowing. There, he said. Old launch platforms. Lyra looked uncertain. They look dead. He grinned faintly. So did I yesterday. He started down the slope, determination hardening his stride. Lyra followed, a quiet flame kindling in her chest. Far above them, unseen, the relay blinked again, faster this time. Across the cold void, something old and vast turned its gaze toward the signal. The plane stretched before them like an ancient scar, dotted with broken metal and sun-bleached stone. Wind roared across the open expanse, carrying the scent of dust and lightning. Mason's boots crunched over debris as he led the way toward the skeletal spires that jutted from the horizon. Each structure leaned slightly, weathered by centuries, yet still humming faintly with residual energy. Old launch platforms, he said under his breath. If even one reactor core's intact, we've got a chance. Lyra followed silently, her eyes wide with awe. Your people built these, she asked. He shook his head. Not mine. Maybe theirs, the first ones who came. She frowned. The destroyers. He hesitated, then nodded. Or their ghosts. They reached the base of the nearest spire by noon. The structure loomed hundreds of meters tall, its metal skin scorched and overgrown with vines that pulsed faintly like veins. Mason pressed a hand against the surface. Warmth vibrated beneath his palm. Still alive, he murmured. He circled the base until he found a maintenance hatch half buried in soil. Help me clear this. Together they pulled away roots and mud until the metal gleamed through. Mason pried it open with the edge of his sword, sparks jumping. A hollow clang echoed deep within. He peered inside, darkness, ladders, the scent of ozone. It goes down, he said. Probably to the control core. Lyra hesitated at the edge. It feels wrong. So does dying in a firestorm, he replied, climbing in. She followed. The shaft descended far deeper than expected. Their breaths echoed against metal walls as they climbed rung after rung, the faint light from Lyra's skin illuminating narrow confines. After several minutes, the tunnel widened into a chamber lit by intermittent blue flickers. Machinery filled the space, massive turbines, fractured conduits, panels half melted by some forgotten blast. Mason landed lightly, scanning the room. This must be the reactor bay, he said. He knelt beside a cracked control console and brushed away dust. Symbols glowed faintly to life, forming strings of alien code. Language matrices close to Terran derivative, he muttered. I can read part of it. Lyra stepped closer. What does it say? Status, dormant. Core integrity, 61%. He smiled grimly. That's enough. He began working fast, connecting wires, rerouting circuits. The hum deepened as systems flickered online. Lyra watched, uneasy. If you wake it, will it not call more light to the sky? He shook his head. I'm isolating the output, turning it inward. If we can get thrust systems to charge, I might be able to override the relay signal. She didn't understand the words, but his tone, calm, focused, made her trust him. Minutes turned into hours. Sweat ran down Mason's face as he adjusted the final conduit. There, he said. It's primed. He pressed a sequence of keys. The entire chamber trembled. Light spread along the walls, and the turbines began to spin. The noise built like thunder. Lyra flinched. What is it doing? Waking up, he said simply. But deep within the spire, something else stirred. A new vibration resonated through the metal, deeper, older, almost sentient. Mason froze, hand hovering above the console. That's not the reactor, he whispered. The lights shifted from blue to red. Words flashed across the screen. Defense protocol, active. Lyra's breath caught. What does it mean? Mason's face hardened. It thinks we're the enemy. The floor split open as mechanical limbs emerged, unfolding from hidden compartments. Drones, different from the serpents before, taller, humanoid, eyes glowing crimson. They surrounded the chamber, moving with eerie precision. Mason drew his sword, the hum filling the air. Stay behind me, he said. No, Lyra whispered. This is my world too. She stepped forward, light flaring along her veins. The machines hesitated, their sensors reacting to her glow. Mason seized the moment. He leapt, blade slicing through the nearest drone's neck. Sparks exploded. Another swung at him. He ducked, countered, drove his blade through its chest. The fight raged in the confined chamber. Lyra used her light to blind the sensors, weaving between strikes. "To your left," she shouted. Mason pivoted just in time, deflecting a blow meant for his head. The energy from his sword cut deep, splitting armor like fabric. But more drones descended from the walls, dozens of them. "There's too many," she cried. He gritted his teeth. "Then we hit harder." He slammed his sword into the ground, channeling the reactor's ambient energy. The floor erupted in a wave of light, vaporizing several drones instantly. The backlash threw him to his knees. Smoke and ozone filled the air. "That's," he gasped, "the last trick I had." Lyra knelt beside him, grabbing his shoulder. "Then I will finish it." She turned toward the reactor core, eyes blazing. "The machine listens to the forest's song," she said. "Then let it hear ours." She pressed her palms to the metal floor. Her light spread outward like water, merging with the spire's circuits. The red glow faltered, shifting toward gold. Mason stared, stunned. The hum changed pitch, softer, harmonic. The drones paused mid-motion, their eyes flickering uncertainly. "She's rewriting it," Mason realized. Lyra trembled, veins burning with light. The power coursed through her body, threatening to tear her apart. "Stop," he shouted. "You'll kill yourself." She looked back, smiling faintly. "You said humans fight monsters. So do we." The light engulfed her completely. The machines froze, then slowly lowered their weapons. The red faded from their optics. Silence fell, broken only by the soft hum of reactivated systems. Mason crawled toward her, heart pounding. She lay collapsed beside the reactor, her glow dimmed to a faint shimmer. "Lyra," he whispered, lifting her gently. Her chest rose shallowly. "Did it stop?" she murmured. "Yeah," he said hoarsely. "You did it." She smiled weakly. "Then the river flows again." He carried her out of the chamber as the spire stabilized. Outside, the sky was deep crimson, streaked with the lingering beam that still connected to the orbital relay. Mason looked up, rage tightening his throat. "Not done yet," he muttered. He laid her down on a flat stone, covering her with his cloak. "Stay alive," he said. Then he turned back toward the spire. "If that relay's still transmitting, I'm cutting the cord myself." He climbed the structure's side, fingers gripping scorching metal. Wind howled, tearing at him, but he kept climbing, higher and higher, until the clouds swallowed him. Lightning flashed around the spire, illuminating his silhouette against the storm. At the top, a massive dish rotated slowly, crackling with blue fire. He reached it, breath ragged. "End of the line," he whispered. Drawing his sword, he plunged it into the control node. Energy surged up his arm, searing through him, but he held fast. The sword's glow merged with the dish, bending its beam until it shattered like glass across the sky. The feedback flung him backward, lightning bursting in every direction. He landed hard, pain erupting through every nerve. The spire groaned, its systems collapsing. But the beam was gone. The sky darkened to normal once more. Mason staggered to his feet, barely conscious. He looked up at the heavens, chest heaving. "No more gods," he whispered. Then the world went black. When he awoke, he was lying on soft earth. The air smelled of rain. Lyra sat nearby, her glow faint but steady, watching over him. "You lived," she said softly. He tried to smile. "So did you." She touched the side of his face, expression unreadable. "The sky is quiet again. Whatever you did, it stopped." He nodded weakly. "Relays dead. Signals gone." She looked toward the horizon, where the spires now stood dark and still. "The tribe will see this," she murmured. "They'll know the gods have fallen." He managed a low chuckle. "Good. Maybe they'll start thinking for themselves." She frowned slightly. "And you? What will you do now?" He stared up at the clearing sky. "Help them rebuild. Help you rebuild. Maybe that's what I was meant for all along." Over the following days, they returned to the Riverlands. The jungle seemed brighter, freer somehow. When the tribe saw them approach, no one raised weapons. The elders came forward slowly, eyes wary. Mason stopped a few paces away, resting on a carved staff for balance. "Your god's gone," he said simply. "But your world's still here. Maybe that means something." The oldest among them studied him for a long time before nodding. "Perhaps the gods were never above us," he said. "Perhaps they were waiting within." The crowd murmured, not in anger but wonder. Lyra stepped beside Mason. "The balance can be remade," she said softly. "Without blood." The elder turned to her. "Then you will guide us." She hesitated, then looked at Mason. He nodded once. "She already has." That night, fires burned along the river, not for sacrifice, but for celebration. The tribe danced, their songs rising into the humid air. Mason sat apart, watching the light reflect off the water. Lyra approached, carrying 2 cups carved from river shells. "Drink," she said. "For the living." He smiled faintly and took one. The liquid burned pleasantly down his throat. "Not bad," he said. "Fermented tree sap," she explained. "You'd call it something else." "Probably trouble," he said, and she laughed softly. For the first time, it didn't sound like fear. The music swelled around them, and Mason found himself smiling in return, small, tired, but real. As the night deepened, he glanced toward the stars. "If anyone's out there," he murmured, "don't come looking." Lyra followed his gaze. "Will they listen?" "Probably not," he said. "But maybe they'll be too late." She placed her hand on his. "Then they'll find us ready." He turned to her, the firelight catching the faint glow in her eyes. "Yeah," he said quietly. "They will." In the distance, the spires stood silent against the horizon, their lights extinguished but their presence eternal, a monument to the day a man and a girl defied gods, machines, and destiny itself. The river flowed again, carrying away the bones of the past. And somewhere deep within the jungle, beneath roots and stone, a faint heartbeat echoed through the earth, not mechanical this time, but alive, growing stronger with each passing dawn. Morning mist drifted low across the river, soft as breath, curling through roots and reeds. The jungle had grown still again, the air carrying the scent of renewal. Lyra stood at the water's edge, her reflection flickering between light and shadow. The faint glow of her markings shimmered like veins of dawn. Behind her, the village stirred, no drums of sacrifice this time, no chants to the river god. Only murmurs of life returning, of people learning to breathe without fear. Mason's silhouette appeared from the mist, limping slightly, his right arm wrapped tight with bandages. "You're awake early," he said. She turned, smiling faintly. "The river sounds different now. Like it's free." He nodded. "It is." They stood in silence, watching the water flow past the rocks where she had once been cast to die. The current glittered gold in the new light. "Strange," she said softly. "I used to hate this place." He looked at her, eyes distant. "Sometimes we have to bury what tried to kill us before we can live again." The days that followed were quiet but full. Mason worked among the tribe, repairing tools, forging blades from the wreckage metal he'd salvaged, teaching those who dared to learn. His strange methods fascinated them, his fire-based forges, his measured patience, the way he treated every spark like a friend instead of a weapon. Lyra helped him translate, her voice bridging 2 worlds. The elders watched carefully, unsure if they were witnessing blasphemy or rebirth. But as the days became weeks, and no curses fell, curiosity replaced fear. The young ones followed him everywhere, mimicking his movements, laughing when he smiled. It was the first laughter the village had heard in years. When he saw that, something inside him eased, a wound he hadn't known he'd been carrying. "You're teaching them to fight," Lyra teased one evening as they mended nets by the fire. "No," he said, looking up, "I'm teaching them to build." At night, the stars were clear again. The great beam that had once cut the sky was gone, leaving only stillness. Yet Mason often found himself staring upward, haunted by what might come. The relay was destroyed, but if even a fraction of its signal had escaped before he severed it, someone, somewhere, might have heard. "You're thinking again," Lyra said one night, joining him on the ridge. He smiled faintly. "Bad habit. What worries you now?" that saving one world isn't enough to change the next. She looked up too, her glow reflecting the constellations. Then stay and change this one first. He studied her profile, stronger now, more certain. You sound like you've done this before. No, she said softly. But you make me believe I could. Weeks passed. The forest began to heal where the spires had fallen silent. Vines reclaimed the ruins, and the river carved new paths. The tribe learned to live without offerings, to hunt and plant and trade among themselves. Children played near the shallows where once they had feared to walk. Mason built a forge beneath the great tree roots, using salvaged components to power tools and lights. Lyra became the bridge between her people and the man from the stars. Together, they taught balance not through worship but through understanding. Still, whispers persisted, stories of gods that might one day return. Some nights, the sky would flicker faintly, a glint that vanished as soon as it appeared. Mason watched those glints with quiet tension. If they come, he murmured once, we'll have to be ready. Lyra touched his shoulder. We will be. But peace rarely lasts where old powers sleep. One night, as a storm rolled over the horizon, Mason's device crackled to life on its own. He stared at the flickering light, confusion turning to dread. A faint signal pulsed across the screen, a pattern repeating in ancient code. No, he whispered. Lyra approached. What is it? A response, he said grimly. They heard. The rain began to fall, slow at first, then steady. How long until they come? She asked. Depends how far they are. Could be days. Could be years. Then we prepare. For what? He asked quietly. For them, she said. For whatever comes. You taught us that we can stand. Her calm steadied him. He looked at her then, really looked, the girl who had once been cast away now standing taller than anyone around her. You don't fear them? He asked. She smiled faintly. I fear forgetting what we've become more. The following morning, Mason gathered the elders and hunters. If they come, they won't arrive as gods or ghosts, he said. They'll come in machines. Fire and steel. Like the ones that burned your world long ago. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. He raised a hand. But they can bleed. And if we stand together, we can make them remember that. The tribe's eyes met his, some afraid, some fierce. Lyra stepped forward. The gods we feared once bled too, she said. We saw it. We lived it. Now we decide what we worship, fear or freedom. Silence followed her words, heavy and electric. Then one by one, the warriors nodded. Mason felt something shift, resolve replacing superstition. Then it's settled, he said. We start building tomorrow. They worked through the days that followed, forging weapons and defenses from scavenged ruins. Mason taught them to channel energy through conductive metal, to trap heat and shape it into tools. The forest became an arsenal of quiet defiance. Hunters learned to move like shadows, their bioluminescent markings masked beneath resin. Children carried messages between camps. The old songs were rewritten, not prayers, but promises. You've started something, Lyra said as they watched the fires of the workshops at dusk. Mason exhaled, weary. I just reminded them what they already had. Hope, she said. He nodded. And fire. One evening, while the jungle slept, Mason stood alone by the river. His reflection wavered beneath moonlight. He thought of the countless worlds beyond, the silence between stars, and how small this one patch of earth was. Yet somehow, it mattered more than any of them. He drew his sword and knelt, planting it into the soil. No more monsters, he whispered. Lyra's voice came from behind him, soft but firm. Even humans. He smiled without turning. Especially humans. She stepped closer, the air between them charged with warmth and rain. Then we'll keep you honest. He looked up, meeting her gaze. I'll hold you to that. Their hands found each other, steady and real in the night's quiet breath. When the signal finally came, it wasn't fire from the sky but light, an aurora that spread across the horizon like woven silk. Mason's device buzzed again, but this time its tone was steady, not hostile. He lifted it cautiously. A voice emerged, faint and distant. Unidentified human transmission detected, coordinates verified. Response pending. He swallowed hard. They're human, he said softly. Lyra's eyes widened. Your people. Maybe. He hesitated. Or what's left of them? She studied him. Will you go? The question pierced deeper than she intended. He stared at the lights above, then at her. I don't know. If they are your kind, they may bring more war. Or peace, he said quietly. Or both. The next morning, he stood by the cliff where they'd once escaped. A ship, sleek, small, foreign, cut through the clouds, descending slowly toward the plains. The tribe gathered at the riverbank, eyes wide. They come, Lyra whispered. Mason watched, heart heavy. Yeah, he said. They do. As the craft touched down, wind and light rippled across the grass. The hatch opened, and figures stepped out, humans, unmistakably human, but clad in armor that glimmered like liquid glass. One raised a hand in greeting. Mason descended the slope slowly, sword sheathed at his back. Identify yourself, the lead figure called. Lieutenant Mason Hale, Expedition Corps, he replied. The figure tilted their helmet back, revealing a woman's face, young, sharp, eyes full of calculation. We received your signal, she said. You're a long way from home. So are you, he replied. She looked past him toward the gathered tribe. Locals. Survivors, he said. Of our mistakes. Her expression tightened. Then we'll have to debrief. No, he said firmly. You'll have to listen. The soldiers glanced among themselves. This world's under pre-collapse quarantine, she said. We're here to assess containment. Containment, he echoed bitterly. You mean ownership. We're preventing contamination, she said evenly. Their biology could compromise. Their biology saved me, he snapped. And probably you, if you're lucky enough to learn something. The tension thickened. Lyra appeared beside him, unafraid, her light pulsing faintly through the mist. The woman's gaze flicked to her. Native hybridization. Friend, Mason said sharply. Remember that word. The officer hesitated, reading his eyes. Something in his stance, tired, unbroken, made her lower her weapon slightly. You're claiming integration. He nodded. I'm claiming evolution. For a long moment, no one moved. Then the officer exhaled. Our protocol says to extract and sterilize. And your conscience? Mason asked. She didn't answer. Instead, she looked again at Lyra, then at the tribe gathered silently behind her. They believe you are God, she said quietly. No, he replied. Just human. Her lips twitched. Sometimes that's worse. He almost smiled. Sometimes that's better. After a pause, she tapped her wristband. Command, this is Lancer 2, she said. No hostile contact. Planet stable. Lifeforms adaptive. No action recommended. Static answered. Repeat, she said. No action recommended. Mason exhaled slowly, the tension draining from his shoulders. She looked back at him. You'd better make this place worth the exception. He nodded. We already are. The ship departed hours later, rising through the clouds until its light vanished among the stars. Mason watched it fade, uncertain if it would return, and hoping it wouldn't. Lyra stood beside him, arms folded. Will they come back? Probably, he said. But next time, they won't find worshippers. They'll find equals. She smiled. You sound like an elder. Don't insult me, he muttered, and she laughed softly. The sound rolled through the forest, echoed by the river, blending with the call of unseen birds. For the first time, Mason let himself laugh too. That night, the fires burned brighter than ever before. The tribe sang songs of freedom, of the day gods bled and men built bridges from their bones. Mason sat among them, listening. A child climbed into his lap and handed him a carved toy, a small figure holding a sword. Is that supposed to be me? He asked. The boy grinned. No, he said proudly. It's everyone. Mason looked down at the toy for a long time, then smiled. Good answer. When dawn came, the river shone like molten glass. Lyra stood on the bank, her reflection clear and whole for the first time. Mason joined her, carrying his sword. He planted it once more into the soil. Time to rest, she asked. For a while, he said. Until the next storm. She turned to him. And if it comes? He smiled faintly. Then we jump first. Her laugh was quiet, certain. Together, they watched the sun rise over a world reborn, not ruled by gods or machines, but by those who had learned that even the weakest could defy fate when someone dared to stand beside them.